I'm joined by two gentlemen who know a lot about our BICS private partnership with the European Commission, the CBE JU. Welcome.
Thanks very much.
Patrick Barrett, you are a member of the States Members Representative Group for the CBE JU representing Ireland, and you also work for the Irish Ministry of Agriculture. And Kevin, a professor in biotechnology. You're also the chair of the Scientific Committee Group of the CBE JU. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So, can you both tell me what you think are the main advantages of a partnership, public-private partnership like the CBE JU in terms of the bio-based industries?
Well, I think the joint undertaking is unique because bioeconomy needs multiple actors to come together, and they need to invest in the development of science, technology, innovation, engineering, primary production, and work with other players in the market to work together to bring ideas into use and to make them commercial. And this is a big challenge, and it's an alignment of people who are not used to working together. And without this funding program and the structured approach, you wouldn't get this mobilization of the people who need to work together to bring the bioeconomy to life. So it's vitally important, the CBE JU. It does things that no other funding program does for the bioeconomy. And it's absolutely breaking ground for Europe in this space. And I think that the importance will be seen in time in really aligning the actors to bring science to life and products to the market.
Yeah, and so from a scientific point of view, I think what it's doing is it's bringing, let's say, researchers who are traditionally in the low technology readiness level science. So they're very much about maybe curiosity-led discovery. What if I study this, what happens? Yeah, and there's a place for that in society. It's very important for education and training. But it's bringing those researchers further up the technology readiness level. And if you look at the CBE JU, it identified that there was a gap. There was a gap between the knowledge that was inside in universities and research performing organizations and the gap towards industrial implementation. But it also brings industry back down the TRL as well and saying, okay, how do we address the gap together? So for me, the CBE JU is really, as Patrick's saying, bringing actors together to say, how do we overcome this valley of death? Yeah, there are two valleys of death. There's the technological valley of death, and then there's, let's say, the investment or market valley of death. The CBE JU is addressing both, but in the first instance, it is saying, okay, we need to work together in order to tackle these technological scale-up issues, researchers and industry. And it's very important as well, if you look at the CBE JU, there is not a monopoly on knowledge. Yeah? There is knowledge that industry have that academics don't have, and vice versa. So for me, as Patrick said, it's bringing people together to solve a problem.
Speaking as a representative from a member state, can you think of any sort of particular milestones or successes of the CBE JU you could talk about?
Well, I suppose one of the biggest milestones was running the successful BPI JU, and then through the next funding round of the EU being successful in developing that to become the CBE JU. And that was really important. That was really confirmation that the original idea to fill the gap, as Kevin has mentioned, was validated. And then the idea is to go further with the activity of the CBE JU. So we've seen important elements being developed further. I mean, we were speaking last week to Virginia Pizzolo, who was over in Ireland, speaking about with Irish stakeholders about the opportunities in the 2026 programme, and she was highlighting how 80% of the funding is going towards these demonstration action and flagship activities. And this is so important to be able to explain to policymakers that if you want to scale up innovation, yes, you need your research and innovation, your curiosity-led work, or work that industry has an interest in but not necessarily is being funded in, but then you take that knowledge and you put it into use in a place-based situation, you scale up the technology, you address many of the issues, and then you try to put it into a commercial setting. This is showing member states how you scale up the bioeconomy. They're able to then reflect on that in their own funding approaches, and they're able to use some of those types of tools then to maybe help build a bioeconomy pipeline within Europe and ready people so that they can be, I suppose, applicants or participants in CBE JU. So I think that has explained to Europe how the bioeconomy can build up and can work, and that's really important work. Like, it would not happen without this, with this funding programme.
Before I move on to you, Kevin, just for everyone listening and watching at home, just to let you know that the BBIJU was the predecessor of the CBEJU. It was the first joint undertaking between ourselves, BIC, representing the private sector, and the European Commission. And also, Patrick mentioned Virginia. She is the deputy head of the CBEJU. Kevin, can you give me your thoughts as well, please?
So I think a key milestone for the CBEJU, and as Patrick mentioned, the emergence of CBE from BBI, but the number of flagship projects that were funded, that is really critical, because at the outset, what was identified was that there were not enough demonstration projects for government to be able to see, well, where are we investing? For industry to say, hey, you know, this is actually an area that's growing, this is an area with potential. So people imitate what they can see. And so the building of flagship projects, that was a major milestone. But what it did was it actually brought investment back to Europe. So that's really critical as well. And that was, again, another objective of the program. How do we ensure that European industry is going to invest in Europe for biorefineries? And so I think the building of flagships, and also if I look at policy, the bioeconomy strategy was set about building the CBEJU. Yeah, it created the ecosystem for CBEJU to exist. But the CBEJU is now influencing policy positively, and it is informing policy on how the bioeconomy should grow, what the CBE should be maybe in 5 years' time. There are biotech acts, there are life science strategies, there's a new revised bioeconomy strategy. All of these things have been influenced by members of the CBEJU, by members of BIC. So that is creating the ecosystem. So a major achievement of the CBEJU is to actually create this heterogeneous ecosystem. We have many different voices, but contributing to common goals. And that's really important.
Thank you, Kevin. You speak about sort of in 5 years' time. We know that the current partnership is actually due to end in 2027. And I hear that both of you are keen for it to keep on going. Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think the signals appear strong in the broadest sense from the work on the multi-annual financial framework. We can see the kind of policy window around health, biotechnology, agriculture and bioeconomy. And I get this from an innovation perspective. You know, there's this type of spillover that can happen in this broad sort of outlook. So that's a good start. And I think the opportunity within the language of the text appears to allow for a successor to the CBEJU to emerge. I think, though, like before, I think the key thing is to come back with a stronger version. And I think the important point now is for the stakeholders is to think about how the CBEJU successor needs to look to deal with the bioeconomy and how it needs to develop. So there's good starting work going on. We see a financial deployment group being established, a primary producers stakeholder group cutting across agriculture, forestry and the blue bioeconomy in place. These should be influential into the thinking of how the successor emerges. But I think the most important point is that a successor must emerge. You cannot invest in the bioeconomy over the period of, say, the 2 last successive funding rounds of the EU and think that's it, the job is done. This is, as we would have discussed, Kevin and myself, you know, the fossil fuel industry would have been something that had emerged over the last 100+ years. This is the kind of industry that gives the guiding line about how long you need to be investing in the type of area of the bioeconomy. So we're only at the initial stages of it. Now we're ramping things up with the EU bioeconomy strategy. Now the CBE needs to come back in with a successor idea and really push this forward again. So that's, I think, what we're looking at from the perspective of the Ministry in Ireland, an advanced CBE JU successor.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Patrick. You absolutely need a successor. It is critically important. The example of the fossil industry is a very good example. We need to continuously innovate. This is a seminal area. You have very large companies, very small companies within the bioeconomy, but they're in traditional sectors like agriculture, forestry, and the marine. The bioeconomy, as we define it now, this kind of industrial revolution in a way, is a very different set of technologies, very different way of doing business. So we're at the very start of this. We need a partnership, because a partnership isn't about everybody agreeing with everything that we think. It is about coming together and compromising, coming together and understanding we have problems. How do we address those problems? How do we work together? I think the CBE JU is a great example of where you have policymakers on one side and you have industry on the other. And they really are working together to make a difference, to have benefit for society. So, of course, businesses wanted to make profits, to have new business, but government also want to create employment, they want to create new opportunities. We've heard from van der Leyen in terms of autonomy for Europe, etc. The joint undertaking is a very good example of where you are bringing people together to talk about these things and to have a strategy, a common strategy. If you don't have a joint undertaking, you don't have a common strategy. You have a public strategy and you have a private strategy. And so for me, it's absolutely essential. And as Patrick said, this is not a 10-year play, 20-year play. This is a century play. We need to continuously support partnership so that we can really get the best out of innovation.
Thank you very much.